Tonight, a Trump administration official telling CNN that the president could open an investigation into his claims of voter fraud as early as tomorrow. Let's discuss now. CNN political commentator Van Jones, a former Obama administration official, joins us. Nice job, by the way, Van. Political commentator Jeffrey Lord, who was a political director in the Reagan White House. You did okay, Jeffrey. No, you did very well. Thank you. And Reverend Dr. William Barber, president of the North Carolina NAACP, who always does a great job. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. Jeffrey, the president is calling for a major investigation into voter fraud. Tonight he spoke with ABC News with David Muir. Listen to this.
What you have presented so far has been debunked. It's been called false.
Take a look at the Pew reports.
I called the author of the Pew report last night, and he told me that they found no evidence of voter
fraud. Then why did he write the report?
He said no evidence of voter fraud.
Excuse me. Then why did he write the report?
So
according to Pew report, then he's groveling again. You know, I always talk about the reporters that grovel when they want to write something that you want to hear, but not necessarily millions of people want to hear or have to hear.
So you've launched an investigation.
We're going to launch an investigation to find out. And then the next time, and I will say this, of those votes cast, none of them come to me. None of them come to me. They would all be for the other side. None of them come to me. But when you look at the people that are registered, dead, illegal, and 2 states, and some cases maybe 3 states, we have a lot to look into.
Okay, this is a very, very important discussion. All right, so I want us to be honest about this, because I think people are relying on us, obviously they are, for the truth. Members of his own party have shut this down. His own attorney said there's no fraud or mistake in 2016. Why does he insist on the author of the study has come in on this network? He spoke with David Muir, said there's no evidence.
There's more than this study. There's plenty of evidence, right? I'm looking right now at the Heritage Foundation sampling of election fraud cases from across the country. 742 sampling now, 742 criminal convictions, 462 cases. And This is all across the country. And they have the names of the individuals, what they were convicted for, when they were convicted,
Okay.
et cetera.
Let's just say,
my point is, let's find out. Because the answer is, we don't know how many.
okay, fine. I think people want to know that.
Yeah.
Even with what you're saying,
Yeah.
it does not say thousands,
3 to 5 million.
millions of illegal.
The key word
There were
here,
millions
Don,
of
was-
illegal
the
votes.
key word was sampling. This was just a sample.
But wouldn't a sampling say instead of 100 or 700? What did it say?
Don, we have no
millions?
idea. That's the point. Is
Okay.
that the people who started saying we have no idea how much of this there is,
Well,
and so I'm
Jeffrey,
saying
somebody
let's
has
find
an
it out.
idea, and
Let's find it out.
I want to hear from the biggest expert on this whole thing is on this. When you're talking about voter suppression,
It's
voter
Dr.
fraud,
William Barber.
it's Dr. William
You dealt
Barber.
with it. You've dealt with it not only, Dr. Barber, during this election cycle, but you have dealt with it for many years. Go on.
Now, we've been fighting ever since then. You know, Jeffrey, call yourself Lord, but their last name is Lord, but come on, brother. Listen, we know the guy you're talking about, Vaughn, well, he's been proven to be fraudulent. They brought him to North Carolina, and his claims were the same claims Republicans used in North Carolina to justify the worst voter suppression law. And the courts ruled against them, said they had engaged in surgical voter suppression. That's the issue. 22 states since 2010, 2 years after Obama won, have passed voter suppression. Voter suppression. 15 states since 2013. We're talking about states where you had some of the highest turnout of African Americans and Latinos, where Republican-led legislatures went in and did voter suppression. That's
voter
the
ID,
issue.
actually.
Voter fraud is a lie. Voter suppression is alive and well. And the truth is, you scratch a lie, you find a thief.
Reverend,
The thieves that have stolen
question,
elections do not
Reverend.
want to deal with this. Yeah.
Reverend,
Yeah.
Jeffrey just said something that I hear a lot of Republicans say.
Right.
When you say voter suppression, they say all they're asking for is the voter ID. In North Carolina, was it only about voter ID?
Right. No, it wasn't. It was about 40 changes. They rolled back same-day registration. They rolled back early voting. They passed the worst form of photo ID. And the court said it was unconstitutional. First of all, I heard Jeffrey say last night, you can buy medicine, you need an ID. First of all, medicine is not a civil right or a constitutional right. Secondly, people do give the last 4 digits. You know about the Harvard law? They give the last 4 digits of their Social Security, the last 4 digits of their license. When they do their voter registration, they have to sign their names. It's called signature attestation. You get a felony if you lie. And there has been no cases of this. No cases. This is the same lie that Tom Tillis, when he was Speaker of the House, used to justify the worst voter suppression. He used this same fraudulent researcher, Von Spenvosky, who was proven fraudulent. The courts ruled against him. And even later, Tom Tillis came on and said there really was no voter fraud. We just want to protect the vote. No, this is about voter suppression. This is about trying to suppress the African-American vote. We had 868 less voting sites in the Black community in 2016 than we did in 2012. That's what's really going on here.
You want to respond? I have to get to the break. Would you like to respond?
I would just say that voter suppression would mean, among other things, that people who are non-citizens of the United States are voting and suppressing the votes of those who are citizens.
No.
That's voter suppression.
That's not true, Jeffrey. That's not true. Voter suppression is when the courts say, when you surgically and intentionally suppress African Americans and Latino. I'm not talking about my opinion. I'm talking about court-proven truth. Not the lies of Donald Trump or the lies of the Republican Party, but the courts have ruled unanimously. In our case, 2 white judges and 1 African American that the state engaged in voter suppression, racialized voter suppression, both in the voting and in gerrymandering. They even call the gerrymandering apartheid districting.
Yeah.
That's what we need to be dealing with and fixing.
Dr. Barber and Jeffrey and
that's why we took them to court.
Stand by. More on the other side of this break. We'll be right back.
Aaron Burnett out front. Stories that matter.
You've got the money and you've got the passion, but how do you actually make a difference?
From the people making headlines.
Did you ever think that this day would come?
To wherever news breaks, Aaron is there. one-on-one, in the field, and around the globe.
Could this kind of thing happen in the U.S.?
Aaron Burnett out front, weeknight 7 Eastern on CNN.
Back now, a source within the Trump administration telling CNN that the president could launch an investigation into his claims of voter fraud as early as tomorrow. Van Jones is back with me, Jeffrey Lord as well, and Reverend Dr. William Barber. We're also joined by Michael Eric Dyson. He's a professor of sociology at Georgetown University. He's the author of Tears We Cannot Stop, a Sermon to White America. My initial intention was to talk to you about Chicago and about violence, but I want to bring you in because you know about this subject, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. So, Professor, thank you so much. Van, the president also said that all the votes go to the other side, but CNN is reporting that Steve Bannon and Treasury nominee Steve Mnuchin are both registered in 2 states. That doesn't mean that they committed voter fraud, that they voted for Hillary Clinton, does it?
No, it doesn't. I think that, some good can come out of this, I hope. If you want to have an honest conversation about voting in America and you look at it seriously, what you will find will be shocking. We don't have a great voting system, and the poorer you are, the more rural you are, the tougher your neighborhood is, and from an urban point of view, the less you are able to exercise your vote. So it's going to turn out that when you look into this, the people who are going to benefit, if you really want to look at voting, are going to be low-income people and people of color. That's who's having a hard time voting. Unfortunately, the conversation is starting off in a ridiculous place.
It's being framed in a manner
right now that I think is unfortunate. It used to be that the president said, I'm going to go into states where actual human beings are being stopped from voting. Now we have a president who says, I'm going to go into states where phantoms who don't exist are voting when they shouldn't be. And I think we can still rescue it, but it's bad.
Yeah, so listen, you heard the president refer to this Pew report. Jeffrey and Dr. Barber and Michael, you heard this in that interview with David Muir. One of the authors of that Pew study has been talking to CNN all day. Listen to his response.
They say, as Andrea Ruth
This is not something that hasn't been looked at. The Bush administration DOJ looked at this. The Federal Election Assistance Commission looked at this. Secretaries of State, both Republicans and Democrats, look at this regularly throughout the election cycle. The Secretary of State of Ohio, Republican John Houston, does it every 2 years. The Republican Secretary of State of Louisiana, Tom Shedler, does a great job of looking at this as well. And they've all come to the same conclusion, which is that the administrative inefficiencies that might exist on the voter rolls do not result in fraudulent ballots being cast. And in fact, in the 5 years since that report was issued, the voter lists have gotten much, much better thanks to the fine work of election officials all across the country to use data and technology to make sure that they can keep up with people's mobility.
And Dr. Dyson, CNN has confirmed statements from there's no voter fraud from the Secretaries of State from Massachusetts, Colorado, Arizona, Vermont, Louisiana, Virginia, Ohio, and California. What's going on here? What's your reaction?
I'm sick of these things.
Well, I think it's symptomatic of this president's inability to square reality with fantasy. The word empirical means that which can be falsified or verified through the census. So if you've got a claim about a particular truth, then produce the proof that substantiates the claim. But he has none. So he projects out of fantasy what he believes to be the case, what he wants to be the case, and he asserts it, and willy-nilly he expects everybody to fall in line. The reality is, as much as Putin was a problem in terms of hacking, here's something that we need to confront, that the real hacking problem, the real problem with voting in this last election happens to be, as Van said earlier, with people of color, elderly people in certain regions of this country who were denied access to voting polls and because of voter ID laws and a whole host of energy and efforts that were directed toward poor people and people of color. So the reality is, at the end of the day, this reinforces the damage that is done to those communities. I hope, like Van, that some spotlight will be put on them. But what I fear is that in all of this miasma and all of this madness, that what we end up seeing is that Donald Trump is living in a fantasy world. The president of the United States of America, exercising power as the most powerful man in the world, is going by delusion as opposed to fact. And that is undermining and circumventing the very flourishing of the democracy he leads. This is a real serious issue.
Let me focus on an area of agreement here. I have a 97-year-old mom who's been voting all her life. When Pennsylvania passed the ID law, she, of course, no longer drives. So I had to take her over to the motor vehicles department to get, it looks like a license, but she can't drive. So it's an ID supplied by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I don't see any reason why governments, state governments, don't send someone to your house. If you can't do it, if there's some economic reason or an age-related reason to right, go to your house and take the picture. How hard is that? I mean, I do think that we have to take care of this.
Dr. Barber?
Yeah, but the problem is, we've had elections all the way through 2008. This started when Obama was elected and African-American Latinos voted man. And all of a sudden, there's a problem with fraud. When these states began to pass, like North Carolina, it's not about photo ID. In North Carolina, they rolled back same-day registration. They rolled back early voting. They lied about fraud to pass a photo ID, a strict form of photo ID. They lied that people didn't have some form of ID when they first registered to vote. So, Don, it's a long discussion, but what we really ought to be talking about is restoring the Voting Rights Act, dealing with voter suppression that has been proven in the courts. That's what we should be dealing with, and opening up access to this democracy.
And as the outgoing president, President Barack Obama, said, we should be trying to get as many people, make it easier for people to vote as possible to get people into the voting process. Our conversation continues on the other side of this break.
Where will the lead take us today? Straight to the source.
Would Israel be willing to go along with those demands?
To a side you haven't seen.
That sounds a young man's game.
All the way to the heart of a problem.
What is going on in Ferguson, Missouri, in downtown America?
Maybe all the way to the president.
Do you think you were naive back then?
The Lead with Jake Tapper. Weekdays at 4.
Hello, I'm CNN's Richard Quest. I watch CNN Go wherever I may find myself. It's really very simple. First, grab your phone or tablet. Oh, thank you. Press TV, select CNN International, and log in with your TV provider. CNN International on CNN Go. The best way to watch CNN anytime, anywhere. Ah, what a view.
We're back now having a very lively conversation and informative. I think you would agree. Van Jones is here, Jeffrey Lord, the Reverend Dr. William Barber, and Michael Eric Dyson, the author of the book, Tears We Cannot Stop. Michael, let's talk about this because it relates to what the president did today. You're in Chicago tonight. Rahm Emanuel, he says Chicago is going to remain a sanctuary city in spite of the president's threat to cut off federal funding. Will other cities follow?
One hopes so. I mean, the reality is it's an interesting diversion and in contradiction in conservatives who usually accede to the legitimacy of states' rights. And at the same time, the imposition of federal rule and law at the behest of the presidency suggests some interesting contradictions. But I think that states around this country and cities around this country have to recognize that with a presidency that has echoed surprisingly narrow definitions of what it means to be an American and has exploded a conception of diversity that brings people in, that wants to build bridges and not walls. I think that brave politicians have to stand up to President Trump and remind him that this is a citizenry that is predicated upon democracy and to opening those borders to receive all of those who would come in to this country to strengthen it, since coerced immigration and immigrants who came here voluntarily make up the bulk of this nation and make up its greatness.
He is saying that he's going to send in the feds and putting out a statement on that. Do you give him credit for wanting to do something about it? He said, I will send in the feds. And he talks about the number of shootings. Do you give him any credit at all?
Well, look, I give him credit for wanting to do something about it, but here's the problem. When the presence of the feds comes, what happens? First of all, it criminalizes an entire population of people so that they become casualties of that war. Number two, if they don't make distinctions between people who are actually likely to commit a particular crime and those who haven't, it only exacerbates the problem. And then thirdly, after those troops leave, what has it done to address some of the underlying problems, which is some of the things I talk about in my book, the economic inequality, the lack of access to capital, the war zones that these enclaves of civic terror called ghettos and slums have become? What about the closing of schools? What about the denial of opportunity educationally? What about job creation? Those are some of the things. If Donald Trump were a smart president, what he would say is that he would bring his entrepreneurial might to bear upon some of these problems to remove the blight as opposed to imposing federal reign.
Van Jones?
Look, again, there is an opportunity here. I think that the Democrats have done a miserable job of dealing with poverty for their constituents in urban areas. Republicans have done a miserable job of dealing with rural poverty. Both parties have let down the poor. even if a conversation starts in a bad place, and I think talking about sitting in the feds is the worst place to start the conversation has now been started. I think it can open doors for people who have solutions. I would love to see a Jack Kemp kind of approach in urban America. I don't want to see a militarization approach, but I just want to say the fact that the president's talking about this could be a good thing.
Good thing. Exactly. Somebody who worked for Jack Kemp. When I worked for him, he made a point of having those of us who work for him go into the cities and talk to people and have a better understanding of the problem. The very first thing to do is stop the carnage. Yeah. And then, as Dr. Dyson is saying, there are other things that can be done.
And I'll give you the last word, Dr. Barber. I only have just a few seconds left, if you will.
Well, we need a real moral revolution of values. We have to deal with the divestment of in these communities. We had 10,000 clergy that offered to meet with Donald Trump in the house of worship to deal with these issues. We know he got the letter, it was certified. They never responded. These are serious moral issues, whether it's voting, whether it's immigration, whether it's dealing with poverty. And it's not any one party, but it's a fact dealing with these issues, doing a serious audit of this country and fixing the problem. We need to do that, but we can't have somebody who's deluded and who's dealing more in lies than they are in the truth.
Dr. Barber, thank you. Van Jones, thank you. Jeffrey Lord, and also thank you to Michael Eric Dyson. The book is called Tears We Cannot Stop, and it's on in bookstores now, or you can get it online. Thank you very much, and we'll have you back to talk more about the book, Dr. Dyson. We appreciate it. We'll be right back.
Choose to go, to indulge your curiosity, explore a new road to see where it takes you. Meet the leaders who change the game. No matter where you are, no matter what the currency, when you run the numbers, they may surprise you, but stay your course. You're on the path to success. CNN Money.
What's it like to make a living off lust? Are you willing to fight against the odds? Can cops still fight crime while under the lens? This is Life.
This is Life with Lisa Lynn. New episodes Sundays at 10 on CNN.
Clear.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news, President Donald Trump sitting down for his first television interview since becoming commander-in-chief less than a week ago. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. The president touching on a wide range of topics, including his claim of voter fraud in the election, his executive order to begin building a wall on the border with Mexico, and his claim that techniques such as waterboarding produce results. We'll talk about all of that. I want to turn now right away to CNN's senior White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, our chief political correspondent, Dana Bash, and our chief political analyst, Gloria Borger. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. Dana, let's listen to what he said about the CIA.
You took some heat after your visit to the CIA in front of that hallowed wall, 117 stars of those lost at the CIA. You talked about other things, but you also talked about crowd size at the inauguration, about the size of your rallies, about covers on Time magazine. And I just want to ask you, when does all of that matter just a little less? When do you let it roll off your back now that you're the president?
Okay, so I'm glad you asked. So I went to the CIA, my first step. I have great respect for the people in intelligence and CIA. I don't have a lot of respect for, in particular, one of the leaders, but that's okay. But I have a lot of respect for the people in the CIA. That speech was a home run. That speech, if you look at Fox, okay, I'll mention it in your network, see what Fox said. They said it was one of the great speeches. They showed the people applauding and screaming, and they were all CIA. There was nobody. Somebody was asking Sean, well, were they Trump people that were, we don't have Trump people, they were CIA people. That location was given to me Mike Pence went up before me, paid great homage to the wall. I then went up, paid great homage to the wall. I then spoke to the crowd. I got a standing ovation.
You would give the same speech if you went back?
Absolutely.
In front of that wall?
People loved it. They loved it. They gave me a standing ovation for a long period of time. They never even sat down, most of them, during the speech. There was love in the room. You and other networks covered it very inaccurately. I hate to say this to you, and you probably won't put it on, but turn on Fox and see how it was covered and see how people respond to that speech. That speech was a good speech. And you and a couple of other networks tried to downplay that speech.
Dana, it seems like he's asking us not to believe what we saw and heard because we aired it live. And he's also asking us to pander to a certain narrative, which journalists do not do. We put out what he said, we played it live, and the reaction is what it is.
Right. He's talking about the reaction in the room. And look, he might be right about that. This was a Saturday where it was not a work day. It was a lottery-based audience, people who worked for the CIA, who wanted to go, got their names into a lottery. So by definition, it was a self-selecting crowd. But regardless of that, even if they were on their feet cheering and whistling, it still doesn't answer the question about knowing the place and knowing the moment and playing to the moment, despite the fact that he clearly had a lot of supporters in the room. And the question about whether or not that was not just presidential, but also respectful to the 117 people who lost their lives, whose stars represented their lives and the lives that they lost in duty for the CIA. That is the complaint that many people in the intelligence community had, period.
And Gloria Borges, our Jim Sciutto, who, and that's his beat to report on intelligence. As he has been reporting, there were plenty of people who were not in that room who did not have a favorable reaction to that.
Oh yeah, as it was going on, and I was getting emails myself from people who have served in the intelligence community, who were completely offended by the fact that the president was giving what amounted to a political speech or a campaign speech in front of that hallowed wall. They felt it was completely inappropriate, and that he should have known better. And that it's one of those moments when you have to decide whether you're still a candidate or you're actually president of the United States. Mm-hmm. And so for them, it was quite disappointing. I mean, I agree with Dana. There were people in the room applauding, and that's fine. And they were also, by the way, the people I heard from were taken aback by that, because they didn't feel that the applause was appropriate either, since it wasn't a campaign rally.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Jim Acosta, it got a lot of attention when he was at the CIA on Saturday, and he talked about maybe having another chance to take Iraq's oil. Let's listen to what he said about that tonight.
Well, we should have kept the oil when we got out. And it's very interesting. Had we taken the oil, you wouldn't have ISIS, because they fuel themselves with the oil. That's where they got the money.
So you believe we can go in and take the oil?
We should have taken the oil. You wouldn't have ISIS if we took the oil.
You've heard the critics who say that would break all international law, taking the oil. But I want to get to the words that you said. Can you believe
that? Wait, can you believe that? Who are the critics that say that? Fools. I don't call them critics. I call them fools.
Let me talk about your words.
We should have kept, we should have taken the oil. And if we took the oil, you wouldn't have ISIS. And we would have had wealth. We have spent right now $6 trillion in the Middle East, and our country is falling apart.
What got my attention, Mr. President, was when you said maybe we'll have another chance.
Well, don't let it get your attention too much, because we'll see what happens. I mean, we're going to see what happens.
So, Jim, international law, he downplayed that. He said we would have no ISIS and maybe another chance. Everything that comes out of the president's mouth, it should be heavily weighed and thought about. And not only the American people, but people around the world are looking to him to figure out what happens next with the country that leads the world.
That's right, Don. And keep in mind, Donald Trump, during the campaign, talked about this idea of taking the oil during the Iraq war. Let's just back up a second and paint the picture of what that might have been like. So the United States goes into Iraq in 2003 based on the premise of weapons of mass destruction. The United States does not find weapons of mass destruction. And what the President of the United States right now is saying is that during that military operation, the U.S. should have seized Iraqis' oil and basically made it part of the U.S. Treasury. That is the kind of conversation that I can tell you right now, a lot of Republicans up on Capitol Hill, they just do not want to hear the president talking like this, especially after he spent the last few days involved in these very damaging distractions, whether it's about the inauguration crowd size or it's about these baseless allegations of voter fraud that occurred in the 2016 election. I mean, John, the idea of taking the oil during the Iraq War sounds like something the British Empire would have done in the 19th century, and why the president feels like he has to relitigate these arguments that really occurred during the campaign. Nobody's having these arguments except Donald Trump. He wants to have these arguments once again to try to convince everybody that he was right about this, and he says that his critics are fools. Well, he's basically saying a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill are fools for believing that that's not a good idea.
Dana?
Don, I think that you're right, and what David Muir said to the president is right about international law. But this isn't just about law. This is about what is morally right and who, Americans are and what they stand for. And the leader of the American people right now, the president of the United States, saying that, he said to the victor goes the spoils. And that's just not morally the way the United States has acted, both domestically and internationally, more importantly, in modern times. Mm-hmm. It happened when, the Pilgrims and others came to this country, and we know what happened with Native Americans, and we have been apologizing, rightly so, for the last several hundred years for that. So why would we act like that in modern times in a place like Iraq?
Hey, Gloria, I want to talk about refugees. You want to weigh in? But
I just wanted to weigh in to follow up on Dana a little bit, because it's the same kind of thinking when you talk about torture. Mm-hmm. Because this is not something this country does. It's something that has been debated vociferously since 9/11, and laws have been passed about it. And we now know it is against our laws to torture. And yet Donald Trump raises it again and says, I'm going to pay attention to, General Mattis, and I'm going to pay attention to Mike Pompeo, my new CIA director, but I actually believe we should do it. When in fact, as President of the United States, he needs to acknowledge that this country has had a long debate about it, and it is not what we do.
Mm. Yeah. Let's talk about refugees, or listen to what he said. It's a contentious issue. Gloria, you'll be first. Listen.
You're about to sign a sweeping executive action to suspend immigration to this country.
Right.
Who are we talking about? Is this the Muslim ban?
We're talking about, no, it's not the Muslim ban, but it's countries that have tremendous terror. And it's countries that people are going to come in and cause us tremendous problems. Our country has enough problems without allowing people to come in who, in many cases or in some cases, are looking to do tremendous destruction.
Which
you look at
countries are we
what's
talking
happened.
about?
I have a whole list. You'll be very thrilled. You're looking at people that come in many cases, in some cases, with evil intentions. I don't want that. They're ISIS. They're coming under false pretense. I don't want that. I'm going to be the president of a safe country. We have enough problems. Now, I'll absolutely do safe zones in Syria for the people. I think that Europe has made a tremendous mistake by allowing these millions of people to go into Germany and various other countries. And all you have to do is take a look. It's a disaster what's happening over there. I don't want that to happen here. Now, with that being said, President Obama and Hillary Clinton and Kerry have allowed tens of thousands of people into our country. The FBI is now investigating more people than ever before having to do with terror. And it's from the group of people that came in. So look, our country has a lot of problems. Believe me, I know what the problems are, even better than you do. They're deep problems. They're serious problems. We don't need more.
Yeah. He should know better, Gloria, than a news anchor, right? He's a leader of the free world now, but is he accurate in his assessment there?
Well, look, this is something we heard from him throughout the campaign. Mm-hmm. And he's talked about extreme vetting, And he says the FBI is now doing more investigations. That's because intelligence and the systems are better, and because the vetting is getting better. Of course, as we all know, it is not perfect. The one thing we did not hear him say, and we're waiting to see what this executive order looks like, we did not hear him talk about a religious ban, which he had talked about in the campaign and then recanted on it. He is talking about not letting in refugees from countries that want to do damage to us or something to that effect. So we're going to have to wait and see what that is and who is on that list, because as we all know, not everyone from every country wants to do damage to us. And so we have to kind of take a look at the specifics here, but none of this actually surprises me.
Jim,
right.
You're at the White House. What are they saying?
Well, I think this is a debatable point. You know, if Donald Trump wants to get away from talking about taking the oil in Iraq and talk about what to do about Syria, I think that is a conversation that a lot of people want to have up on Capitol Hill, and I think he's going to have a lot of willing participants in that conversation. You know, this whole issue of creating safe zones in Syria, he is quite right that is a potential solution here that a lot of people are recommending on both sides of the aisle. Whether or not that would have prevented the humanitarian catastrophe that we're seeing unfold in Syria is another question. But I think what you're going to hear from the president in the coming days, we were expecting this new executive order to come down tomorrow. It may be coming on Friday, according to the White House press secretary. But it is going to deal with this idea of suspending the refugee program, really stopping that Syrian refugee program and putting new restrictions on visas for people coming from parts of the world that are predominantly Muslim. And, you know, whether or not that is Muslim ban light, Muslim registry light, that is going to be a conversation, a discussion that people are going to be having in this town. But at the same time, it is something that this president is very serious about. You know, these are the things that were talked about during the campaign, Don. Elections have consequences, and what we've seen all this week, from TPP to building the wall on the Mexican border to suspending the refugee program, which is something we expect. These are all things that Donald Trump said he would do, and he is now delivering on those promises.
He is. Thank you very much.
This was complete. Just as we can say, this was completely litigated during the general election. Whether people voted on that or not, you know, it's up to each voter to decide. But now President Trump was extremely clear about his views on the refugee crisis, and then during the general election campaign, he changed it from an overall Muslim ban to specific countries and specific regions. And as he said in this interview tonight, that's what he plans on doing.
Yeah, he's doing exactly what he said he's going to do. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate that. We'll be right back.
Where will the lead take us today? Straight to the source.
Would Israel be willing to go along with those demands?
To a side you haven't seen.
That sounds a young man's game.
All the way to the heart of a problem.
What is going on in Ferguson, Missouri, in downtown America?
Maybe all the way to the president.
Do you think you were naive back then?
The Lead with Jake Tapper. Weekdays at 4.
Every day we do stories about people in need. With CNN's Impact Your World, you can help. When you go to the Impact Your World section at CNN.com, you'll find more on the stories that move you. Plus, you can find out just what you can do to help, with links to reputable charities and organizations. Find out more on New Day and go to CNN.com/impact. Be the change. Take action. Make an impact.
President giving his first network interview since becoming commander-in-chief last week. I want to bring in CNN political commentator Kayleigh McEnany, Dana Bash, and Gloria Borger. They're back with me. And we're also joined by CNN political contributor Hillary Rosen and political commentator Kevin Madden. And then we'll be joined in just a moment by Bakari Sellers. Okay, welcome the new folks to the panel. Gloria and Dana were here just a bit earlier. Hillary, to you first. A big question is, what will the president do about dreamers? This is what he said about that.
I want to ask about undocumented immigrants who are here in this country. Right now, they're protected as so-called dreamers, the children who were brought here, as you know, by their parents. Should they be worried that they could be deported? And is there anything you can say to assure them right now that they'll be allowed to stay?
They shouldn't be very worried. They are here illegally. They shouldn't be very worried. I do have a big heart. We're going to take care of everybody. We're going to have a very strong border. We're going to have a very solid border where you have great people that are here that have done a good job. They should be far less worried. We'll be coming out with policy on that over the next period of 4 weeks.
So, Hillary, how do you think dreamers are feeling tonight hearing of that? And what are you thinking when you hear that?
They shouldn't be very worried. They should just be a little worried. What does that even mean? I don't know. You know, we've got, let's be clear, there are 75,000 young people in this country who fall into this category of dreamers, people who have been allowed to stay, to have an education. Most of them are in universities and colleges around the country. So, you know, many are graduating now, looking forward to jobs, and they are in limbo. This program needs to be renewed on an ongoing basis. The first round of these so-called dreamers are up now for renewal of their visas, and if they don't get them, they're not going to be able to find jobs. So, you know, this notion that they shouldn't be worried because people aren't going to come after them doesn't exactly help them. They have to get their permits renewed, and families deserve to have this kind of certainty. And I think the president in that interview was trying to have it both ways instead of being concrete about what he's going to do.
Kayleigh, is this a broken promise to